What if your GMC could hit 600,000 miles, while everyone else is replacing theirs at 200,000? I've done the math. New truck owners pay 30 cents per mile. I've paid 3 cents, 10 times cheaper. Stick around to the end. I'll show you why most trucks die early, even when they're maintained. And it's not what you think. Getting a GMC to 600,000 miles isn't about luck or buying the right year. It's about having a system. Most owners treat maintenance as reactive. Something breaks, they fix it. But at 600,000 miles, you can't afford to be reactive. You have to be proactive. You have to replace parts before they fail. You have to monitor wear patterns. You have to understand that every component has a lifespan, and if you push it past that lifespan, it will take other components down with it when it fails. I'm going to walk you through the exact system I use, broken down into 3 categories: monitoring, proactive replacement, and driving habits. These aren't the basic maintenance tasks everyone talks about. Oil changes, tire rotations, fluid changes. Those are table stakes. If you're not doing those, you won't make it to 200,000 miles, let alone 600,000. What I'm covering today is the advanced stuff that separates trucks that die at 200,000 from trucks that run forever. Let's start with monitoring. At 600,000 miles, you can't just drive your truck and hope everything's fine. You need data. The first tool you need is oil analysis. Every 50,000 miles, I send a sample of my engine oil, transmission fluid, and differential fluid to Blackstone Labs. It costs about $30 per sample, so $90 total every 50,000 miles. That's less than $2 per 1,000 miles. The oil analysis tells me exactly what's happening inside my engine, transmission, and differential. It measures wear metals, iron from the crankshaft and camshaft, copper and lead from the bearings, aluminum from the pistons and cylinder walls. It measures contamination, fuel dilution, coolant leaks, dirt ingestion. And it measures the condition of the oil itself: viscosity, total base number, oxidation. When I get the report back, I'm looking for trends. A little bit of iron in the oil is normal. Metal parts wear slightly over time. But if the iron level is climbing from one sample to the next, that tells me the camshaft or crankshaft is wearing faster than it should. I can take action before it becomes a problem. Maybe switch to an oil with more zinc for better wear protection, or shorten my oil change interval. The same goes for copper and lead. If those numbers are climbing, the bearings are wearing. I can plan for a bearing replacement before the bearing fails and damages the crankshaft. Oil analysis has saved me thousands of dollars by catching problems early. It's the single most important monitoring tool for high-mileage trucks. Let me give you specific numbers to watch for. Iron should be below 50 parts per million. If it's above 75, you have accelerated cam or crank wear. Copper should be below 20 parts per million. Above 30 means bearing wear. Aluminum should be below 10. Above 15 means piston or cylinder wall wear. Silicon above 25 means dirt contamination. Check your air filter and intake system. Fuel dilution above 2% means your injectors are leaking or your piston rings are worn. Coolant in the oil means a head gasket leak or a cracked head. These numbers give you early warning before you hear noises or see smoke. The second monitoring tool is a compression test. Every 100,000 miles, I do a compression test on all 8 cylinders. It takes about 30 minutes and costs nothing if you have a compression tester. You can buy one for $40 or borrow one from an auto parts store. A compression test tells you the condition of the piston rings, valves, and cylinder head gasket. Healthy cylinders should have compression between 150 and 170 psi, and all cylinders should be within 10% of each other. If one cylinder is significantly lower than the others, that tells you there's a problem: worn rings, a burnt valve, or a head gasket leak. At 600,000 miles, I expect to see some compression loss, maybe down to 140 or 150 psi. That's normal wear. But if one cylinder is at 120 psi and the others are at 150, I know that cylinder has a problem and I need to investigate. A compression test also tells you if your engine is ready for another 100,000 miles or if it's time to plan for a rebuild. If compression is still strong and even across all cylinders, you're good to keep driving. If it's weak or uneven, you need to start budgeting for engine work. The third monitoring tool is a leak-down test. This is more advanced than a compression test, but it gives you more information. A leak-down test pressurizes each cylinder with compressed air and measures how much air leaks out. It tells you not just that there's a problem, but where the problem is. If air is leaking past the rings, you'll hear it in the crankcase. If it's leaking past the valves, you'll hear it in the intake or exhaust. If it's leaking past the head gasket, you'll hear it in the cooling system or the adjacent cylinder. I do a leak-down test every 200,000 miles. It's more involved than a compression test. You need a leak-down tester and an air compressor, but it gives you precise information about the condition of your engine. At 600,000 miles, I expect to see some leakage, maybe 5 to 10%. That's acceptable. But if one cylinder is leaking 20 or 30%, I know there's a problem that needs attention. Now let's talk about proactive replacement. This is where most people fail. They wait for parts to break, and by the time a part breaks, it's usually damaged other components. At 600,000 miles, you can't afford to wait. You have to replace parts on a schedule based on their expected lifespan, not based on whether they've failed yet. Here are the critical components and when to replace them. Water pump. Replace every 150,000 miles. The water pump is driven by the serpentine belt or timing chain, and it has a bearing and a seal. Over time, the bearing wears and the seal starts to weep coolant. Most people wait until the water pump is leaking or making noise before they replace it. But by that time, the bearing is so worn that it can damage the timing chain or serpentine belt. And if the water pump fails completely while you're driving, the engine overheats and you risk warping the cylinder heads or blowing the head gasket. That's a $3,000 to $5,000 repair. A water pump costs $150 to $250 and takes about 2 hours to replace. Do it every 150,000 miles and you'll never have a problem. Serpentine belt and tensioner. Replace every 100,000 miles. The serpentine belt drives the alternator, power steering pump, air conditioning compressor, and water pump. It's a critical component. Most people wait until the belt is cracked or squealing before they replace it. But by that time, the belt is on the verge of breaking. If the belt breaks while you're driving, you lose power steering, the battery stops charging, and the engine overheats because the water pump stops turning. A serpentine belt costs $20 to $30. The tensioner costs $40 to $60. Replace both every 100,000 miles, and you'll never have a belt failure. Spark plugs. Replace every 100,000 miles on a gas engine. GM says the spark plugs are good for 100,000 miles, but I replace them at 100,000 regardless of how they look. Spark plugs wear over time. The electrode erodes, the gap widens, and the spark gets weaker. Weak spark means incomplete combustion, which means carbon buildup in the combustion chambers and on the valves. Carbon buildup leads to pre-ignition and detonation, which can damage pistons and rings. Spark plugs are cheap, $8 to $12 each for iridium plugs. For a V8 engine, that's $64 to $96, plus an hour of labor if you have a shop do it. Do it every 100,000 miles, and your engine will run clean and efficient. Fuel filter. Replace every 30,000 miles on a diesel, every 60,000 miles on a gas engine. The fuel filter traps dirt and contaminants from the fuel before they reach the injectors or carburetor. Over time, the filter clogs. A clogged fuel filter restricts fuel flow, which starves the engine and causes poor performance. On a diesel, a clogged fuel filter can damage the high-pressure fuel pump, which costs $1,500 to $2,000 to replace. A fuel filter costs $30 to $50. Replace it on schedule, and you'll never have fuel system problems. Differential fluid. Change every 60,000 miles if you tow, every 100,000 miles if you don't. Differential fluid breaks down over time. It gets contaminated with metal shavings from the gears and bearings. When the fluid breaks down, the gears and bearings wear faster. Most people never change their differential fluid until the differential starts whining or clunking. By that time, the damage is done and you need a rebuild. $1,500 to $2,500. Differential fluid costs $50 to $70 for a complete change. Do it on schedule and your differential will last the life of the truck. Transmission cooler lines. Inspect every 100,000 miles and replace if they show signs of wear. The transmission cooler lines carry hot transmission fluid from the transmission to the cooler and back. They're usually made of rubber with metal fittings. Over time, the rubber degrades from heat and age. If a cooler line bursts while you're driving, you lose all your transmission fluid in seconds. The transmission overheats and fails. That's a $4,000 to $6,000 repair. Transmission cooler lines cost $50 to $100. Inspect them regularly and replace them if you see cracks, bulges, or seepage. Radiator hoses. Replace every 150,000 miles. Upper and lower radiator hoses carry coolant between the engine and radiator. They're made of rubber reinforced with fabric. Over time, the rubber degrades from heat cycles and chemical exposure. The hoses get soft and spongy or hard and brittle. If a radiator hose bursts while you're driving, you lose all your coolant and the engine overheats. Radiator hoses cost $20 to $40 each. Replace them every 150,000 miles along with the water pump. It's cheap insurance against a catastrophic overheat. Thermostat. Replace every 150,000 miles. The thermostat controls coolant flow between the engine and radiator. It opens when the engine reaches operating temperature and closes when the engine is cold. Over time, the thermostat can stick open or closed. If it sticks open, the engine runs too cold, which causes poor fuel economy and increased wear. If it sticks closed, the engine overheats. A thermostat costs $20 to $40. Replace it every 150,000 miles when you do the water pump and hoses. Wheel bearings. Inspect every 100,000 miles and replace when they show wear. Wheel bearings support the weight of the truck and allow the wheels to spin freely. Over time, the bearings wear and develop play. You'll hear a humming or growling noise that gets louder as you drive faster. If you ignore it, the bearing can seize or fall apart, which can cause the wheel to lock up or fall off. Wheel bearings cost $100 to $200 each. If you catch them early, you only replace the bearing. If you wait too long, you might have to replace the hub assembly, which costs $300 to $500. U-joints. Inspect every 50,000 miles and replace when they show wear. U-joints connect the drive shaft to the transmission and differential. They allow the drive shaft to flex as the suspension moves. Over time, the needle bearings inside the U-joints wear out. You'll feel a clunk when you shift from park to drive or from drive to reverse. You might feel vibration at highway speeds. If a U-joint fails while you're driving, the drive shaft can drop and dig into the pavement, or it can whip around and damage the transmission, transfer case, or fuel tank. U-joints cost $30 to $60 each. Replace them when you feel a clunk or see play in the joint. Real quick, if you're finding this useful, hit subscribe. I post new GMC tips every week. Now let's talk about driving habits. How you drive your truck has a massive impact on how long it lasts. At 600,000 miles, I've learned that certain driving habits cause exponentially more wear than others. Here are the habits that will get you to 600,000 miles. Warm up your engine before driving. I don't mean idling for 10 minutes. I mean start the engine, let it idle for 30 seconds until the oil pressure stabilizes, then drive gently for the first 5 minutes until the coolant temperature reaches operating range. Cold oil is thick and doesn't flow well. If you start the engine and immediately rev it or put it under load, you're asking the engine to run with inadequate lubrication. The bearings, camshaft, and piston rings don't get enough oil, and they wear. Let the engine warm up gradually, and the oil will thin out and flow properly. This is especially important in cold weather. In winter, I let the engine idle for a full minute before driving, and I keep the RPM below 2,000 for the first 10 minutes. Avoid short trips. Short trips are the worst thing you can do to an engine. When you start a cold engine, condensation forms inside the engine and exhaust system. That condensation contains acids that corrode metal. If you drive the truck long enough for the engine to reach full operating temperature, at least 20 minutes, the condensation evaporates and the acids are neutralized. But if you only drive for 5 or 10 minutes, the engine never gets hot enough to evaporate the condensation. The acids stay in the oil and corrode the engine from the inside. If you have to make short trips, change your oil more frequently, every 5,000 miles instead of 7,500. And try to combine errands so you're driving for at least 20 minutes at a time. Use cruise control on the highway. Cruise control keeps your engine at a steady RPM, which reduces wear. When you're driving with your foot on the gas pedal, you're constantly making small adjustments, accelerating, decelerating, accelerating again. Those constant RPM changes create stress on the engine and transmission. Cruise control eliminates that stress. The engine runs at a steady RPM, the transmission stays in the same gear, and everything runs smoothly. I use cruise control whenever I'm on the highway for more than a few minutes. It reduces wear and improves fuel economy. Avoid aggressive acceleration and braking. Hard acceleration puts stress on the engine, transmission, and drivetrain. Hard braking puts stress on the brakes, suspension, and tires. At 600,000 miles, I've learned to drive smoothly. I accelerate gently, I anticipate stops and coast to a stop instead of braking hard, and I avoid sudden lane changes. Smooth driving reduces wear on every component of the truck. It also improves fuel economy and makes the ride more comfortable. Don't lug the engine. Lugging means running the engine at low RPM under heavy load. It happens when you're towing a heavy trailer up a hill in too high a gear, or when you're accelerating from a stop in third gear instead of first. Lugging puts enormous stress on the crankshaft, bearings, and piston rings. It causes detonation, which can damage pistons and valves. If you're towing or climbing a hill and the engine is struggling, downshift. Keep the RPM above 1500. The engine is designed to run at higher RPM under load. Don't be afraid to use lower gears. Change your driving style as the truck ages. At 600,000 miles, I don't drive my truck the same way I did at 100,000 miles. I'm more gentle. I avoid full throttle acceleration. I don't tow as heavy as I used to. I give the truck more time to warm up. I'm more cautious in bad weather. The truck has earned my respect, and I treat it accordingly. If you want your truck to last 600,000 miles, you have to adjust your driving style as it ages. You can't beat on a high-mileage truck the same way you beat on a new one. Here's the final piece of the puzzle. Know when to walk away. Not every truck can make it to 600,000 miles. Some trucks have fatal flaws, bad engine castings, weak transmissions, rust in critical areas. If you've done everything right and your truck still has major problems at 200,000 or 300,000 miles, it might be time to cut your losses and move on. I've seen people pour $10,000 into a truck that's not worth saving because they're emotionally attached to it. Don't make that mistake. Do the math. If the repair costs more than the truck is worth, and if the truck has other problems waiting to happen, sell it and buy a better one. But if the truck has been reliable and the only issue is normal wear, fix it and keep driving. The key is knowing the difference between a truck that's worth saving and a truck that's a money pit. Here's the bottom line. Getting to 600,000 miles costs money, about $18,000 over 20 years in my case, but that's 3 cents per mile. Compare that to buying new every 200,000 miles at $60,000 each. That's 30 cents per mile. You save 10 times more by maintaining one truck for 600,000 miles than by buying new trucks every few years. And you avoid the depreciation, the higher insurance costs, and the hassle of buying and selling trucks. If you follow the system I've outlined, monitoring with oil analysis and compression tests, proactive replacement of wear items, and smart driving habits, you can get your GMC to 600,000 miles without major repairs. It's not magic, it's discipline. Now you know how to make your GMC last 600,000 miles without expensive repairs. If you want to know which model years to avoid when buying used, check out my video on the 3 GMC model years everyone avoids that are actually gold mines. And if you're worried about getting ripped off at the dealership, watch my video on GMC dealership scams. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.